Glad you're back. So what we're going to do for the rest of our time together is we're going to focus on ways to use Zoom tools in our online ESL classes. And we're going to do that by showing samples of curriculum from the various stages of the pathway we talked about earlier. So we'll have stage 1 curriculum focusing on settlement and friendship. We'll have stage 2 curriculum focusing on transition, a gentle introduction to the life and teaching of Jesus. And then stage 3 curriculum is those who are spiritually interested, who want to go farther in learning about Jesus' life. So as we begin this, I'm going to ask 2 questions. And the first question is, when your church offers online ESL classes, this ministry will be successful if, or this ministry will be successful when. So now you know how to use chat, hopefully. So I'd like you to type your answer in the chat box. So type your answer. When your church offers online ESL classes, this ministry will be successful if, or this ministry will be successful when. And I'll see, we'll just look and see what you have to say.
Nice answers here we're getting. It will be successful if people register and attend consistently.
Absolutely.
Very true. If there's prayer and commitment.
Yes. So
yeah.
it's not just what the volunteers, it'll be like what the volunteers do. Volunteers will do that. Absolutely.
Yeah. People are committed to making it work. If the hosts and the teachers are genuine and friendly, that's huge. You can make all kinds of mistakes. And if you're friendly, the students just love spending time. The host is well prepared spiritually. That's lovely. That's so true. We pray and just start. I like that one. Just pray about it and then just do something. Get started. Do a simple class.
Isn't that the way most ministry is? You just dive in and try to do something.
On the other hand, planning is good. Doris has planning. That's so true. Have friendly, welcoming hosts. If we have registrants and volunteers, you can make
Absolutely.
it happen. You can have both the people necessary. You're prepared. Prepare as much as you can beforehand and then just go for it. Success will come with full inclusion, patience, and open to everyone's learning style. That's very true. That's a thoughtful answer. People are making relational connections. That's what we emphasize too, that we love our small groups with a volunteer in each small group because it's so relational.
Yeah, that's the most powerful thing, right?
Yeah, and Samantha says the same thing. Relationships are developed between participants and volunteers outside of program time. That's lovely.
Yes.
Yeah, several of our volunteers have done things with students this summer outside of Zoom. Contact that are not attending and ask why, showing that you care. If teachers have some competency, at least being able to speak English, that's the minimum. So one time I put an advertisement in our church bulletin. We really need some more ESL volunteers. If you breathe and smile and speak English, we want you. So,
was smiling an option?
No, smiling. We want volunteers who smile.
Friendly
Yeah.
people. Okay, let me move to a second question.
Well, there's so many good. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Topics are relevant and conducive to conversation. We're willing to take risks and can I add, and be flexible in that. If all the students feel valued,
Yeah,
and
that's
when
powerful.
there's vision and love and empathy for students, these are just amazing, amazing outcomes.
Excellent. So let's consider another question. So you decide you want to do an online ESL class. Why will new Canadians come to your online ESL class? And then once they show up, what will encourage them to return? So once again, I'd like you to type your answers in the chat box. Why will they come to your class, and why will they come back if they've done it once?
coming in so fast. Yeah.
Sorry.
They'll come and they'll come back if there's a sense of connection, if people feel safe, if it's a valuable use of their time, if there's friendship developed, if they feel welcome, there's a friendly face, interesting topics, if they feel comfortable with us. Yeah, there's a lot of friendly comments, and that is so true. I once had a student say she came back the second time because she wanted someone to smile at her again. In her week as a new Canadian, her experience was nobody knew her or smiled at her, but she came back so we would keep smiling. They often return if they feel the love of Christ when they attend. Yeah, these are really great answers. Friendliness, connections, their English improves. They have a voice. That is so true. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they feel engaged.
These are great answers. And these are things, obviously, we want to be thinking about as we plan and design and execute our classes.
Yeah.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the curriculum and how we use curriculum in our classes.
Yeah, it'd be so much fun to talk about all these comments. They're just awesome. But yeah, I know we have to go on.
So what we're doing this fall is one of our classes is a conversation class. So this is a stage 1 class. It's all about, there's no spiritual content, but it's really friendly people having a conversation. So some of the classes will focus on, which lessons are you going to do this fall, June?
Well, we're going to talk about the fall season. We'll do one on Thanksgiving and attitudes. Actually, yeah, Halloween, the daylight savings time, Remembrance Day and War, and then we're doing 2 of the 3 Christmas lessons.
So those are calendar-based lessons.
And then we're going to do some topic-based lessons. We're doing food, cooking, and eating. We're doing good words and bad words, which is really helpful for our students to understand what the swear words mean that some people might be teaching them.
And just this week, Patty wrote the beginner lesson for that, which I thought was very interesting.
Well, you actually have to swear when you're teaching them because the students need to know what that word sounds like if someone says it to them. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, and a few of those other ones. Yeah.
Oh, food. You're going to do the food one, I hope.
Yeah, okay. For sure.
And this summer, you were doing?
We did a conversation class for 14 weeks, and every week was a different province or territory. The first class was just on Canadian characteristics, some unique things about Canada. Each lesson includes the teacher notes, how to introduce the topic, and then there's an intermediate handout with answers and photos, and there's also a beginner handout with lots of photos. So an example would be our characteristics of Canada. Here's the page with some teacher notes, and it's just a suggestion of maybe how to introduce this topic before you break into your small groups. Then every small group has a handout that's shared by their volunteer leader, and the intermediate one.
I highlighted the questions I like. Have you ever had poutine? Do you like fries, gravy, cheese?
Yeah. What's the famous coffee shop? What's a double-double? What's a toque? It's just kind of some unique things about Canada. What's a loonie? What's a toonie? And then we provide photos of all those things and suggested answers. When we first started doing conversation classes years ago, questions with no answers, and the volunteers found it kind of stressful because they didn't always know, what is ginger beef?
Or the history of Tim Hortons, right?
Yeah, tell us about the RCMP, yeah. There's lots of photos with each lesson, and the volunteers find that really helpful to encourage discussion in their small groups.
You could do a whole class just with the pictures, I think.
You could just be talking about the photos for an hour. We do a beginnerized version of each lesson. So we just pick a few of the questions, keep them really simple. And again, lots, even more photos for the beginner groups.
And then here's another lesson. So it's the same for, this one is for British Columbia. Questions about trees, and have you ever been in a forest? What types of berries do you like? Because they grow cranberries and blueberries there. And then questions about the ocean. And then
Answer key and lots of
the
photos.
Queen Victoria,
Of course.
yeah. And then sea life, and then the beginner lesson. So that's a sample conversation class lesson.
Yeah.
Also at stage 1, class you did this summer was ESL for weddings. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we took several weeks. Each week on Zoom, we studied a different aspect of a traditional Canadian wedding process. So we did, you know, a week on what is engagement, a week on planning the wedding, another week on a rehearsal, then the wedding ceremony, and then the honeymoon. We called it the 6 stages of a wedding. And we kept saying, this is general, not everyone's wedding experience is this, but here's some pretty traditional parts of a typical Canadian wedding. The students did lots of parts of the class were done in breakout rooms with a volunteer, and then we met back again together at the end. After our Zoom, several weeks of Zoom classes, all the students watched the wedding online, live, which was a lot of fun. We also had some additional activities. Sometimes people go through pretty quickly the handouts, and so there was other things for the teachers to highlight if they wanted with their small groups.
I like the adjective, noun, verb. Engaged, engagement, get engaged, married, marriage, marry, get married.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All with our example sentences.
And then you did a gardening class.
That was so much fun. And it at first, you know, it didn't really make sense, but we wanted to do something summary that we could do online. So we lined up 4 guest speakers in 4 classes, and we interviewed the guest speakers beforehand and then made a handout. And then at the class, we shared the handout. We went over the words and pictures, and the guest speaker attended Zoom and you know, answered questions. We broke into small groups and had discussion questions. Which of these plant names are the names of women? Or which are the names of an animal? Or there's a country or a continent in some of the plant names. In your opinion, which plant has the most beautiful flower? That was a lot of fun to do the small groups on each topic. And then the guest speaker answered some of our questions. And these are the types of questions the student answers. What do you like about, asked, what do you like about growing plants? How much time do you spend? Have you ever had your plants die? So much fun to hear their answers. One of the guest speakers shared this meme. I walk around like I'm okay, but deep down, I want to buy more plants. And
is that you?
That was actually me, yeah.
Okay.
I do have like 50 plants in my house. Okay, that was such a fun class. And 2 out of the 4 guest speakers ended up inviting the students to their yard for physically distanced, and we all wore masks. And they gave, then the next week, they gave like a personalized tour. The students had studied the words and seen the pictures, and then they got to actually see the yard or the acreage or the deck that people were sharing.
This is a class, you've done the immigrant transition class before, but you did it this time as a conversation class.
We changed one of our courses, which we call Immigrant Transitions, that helps new Canadians understand the psychological and emotional changes that they're experiencing in this massive move. Their reactions are normal. And let's just talk about all the different ways people handle a big change in their life. We found that class very helpful to students who want to take it. And we changed it into a conversation class format for Zoom where there was 15 minutes of information at the beginning. And then we broke up into small groups and actually shared our experiences of moving to Canada and the positives and negatives. And you know well, I could keep talking, but I'll stop. Yeah. Yeah, that's
so
what
I saw this, this is one of the things the teacher shared with the group about the continuum of acculturation. And I like the part like a visitor observes but holds tightly to their cultural identity. And it's farther along the line. Understanding culture, ask questions, look for meaning. Integration, adjusting to a new culture without losing the essence of their own culture. And then assimilation, when new members of a society become indistinguishable from members of the other group. And last week, we were attending this class and the focus was on parenting. So it's like, do the students have a goal for their children in terms of this acculturation, and what could they do to help them achieve that? So the way the teacher did this is they did a panel discussion. They explained what a panel is, and then they just asked all sorts of questions of the panel and see what happens in the class.
So we're hoping to get this material into a book form so we can share it with other churches. If there's someone in a church who's interested in cross-cultural kinds of dynamics like that, it's a very helpful class for our students.
The stage 2 of our classes is the Bridges class. So we've done this for 14 years, every Sunday morning. It's the gentle introduction to the gospel. So friendly people from around the world studying English language, Canadian culture, and the words of Jesus. So we always begin with some sort of cultural introduction and then announcements in this class. So one thing that Patti was doing this summer is questions. Often the cultural explanations, we'll link them if we're doing any parties. So this one, she asked, what does the word hunt mean? So looking for something could be hunting an animal. Synonyms like to search, to rummage, to scavenge. Of course, you can add ER, searcher, hunter, scavenger, and the raccoon is a scavenger. And then this is all to set up for the scavenger hunt that we did online, which was a great party. It was a lot of fun.
Much fun.
And so we explained the game, getting points, kind of samples of a scavenger hunt, and then some of the rules, looking for something in your house. We gave 1 minute for each. I mean, anybody could do this. You just make a list, take 1 minute, whoever, you have to find it in a minute and you get a point, and then give out a prize. So this is the sample announcement of what people would see. And then in subsequent weeks, we showed something like that. And then, another time.
Can I just say, if anyone wants to try the scavenger hunt, Hannah, we could share our PowerPoints, right? Just as a sample. If they email, we're happy to share how we ran our scavenger hunt online.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So sometimes Patty gets creative for introducing the topic. So our alpha starts on Monday evening. So how would you introduce alpha? Well, Patty asked, what are the names of different kinds of facial hair? And then she got people to figure out things like, beard and goatee and mustache and clean shaven. Mostly we want to show the picture of this. That's our daughter with the Prime Minister at the Calgary Stampede. And then yes, why does she do that? Well, it's interesting to think about, it's English language, but also the guy who leads our alpha at our church has a really big mustache. So she could talk about mustache and then introduce alpha.
Yeah. I showed a picture of our pastor with his big mustache, and yeah.
Later this fall, we'll ask, what do we call November 21st?
November 21st.
I have that. I made a mistake when I made that slide. You know the right answer. And then just talk about Remembrance Day, poppies, wearing a poppy, Flanders Field, memories, remembering those who've fallen, something like that. So these are the slides that we'll show for that introduction. And then once we have some sort of cultural introduction, we talk about things that are coming up. So announcements will focus on our intercultural ministry classes, but also things that are going on in the church. So this was the slide for the ESL for Weddings class. We advertised the kids' day camp. Our church tried to do that this summer. Did that work?
They limited, the classes were very small and they just did lots of them. And yeah, it seemed to work well.
Yeah. We're starting a book study.
On Florence Nightingale, I think our teachers are in the class here, and they pick a different book every semester, and they have students who love practicing their English through reading an authentic text, like biography of Florence Nightingale. They've done Robinson Crusoe. In the past, we did The Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe, Anne of Green Gables, that kind of thing.
This is the advertisement for the Canada Party that we did this summer. And then the day of, this was the advertising, the announcement. We advertised the pantry party, which happens tomorrow. So this is what people would see. We're giving them gifts by taking food and putting it in a box in front of Grandma's house. So I hope that's working out. This is the ad for the ESL for Art. So we take about 20 minutes to introduce some topic and then make announcements. And then what we do, we let people know, our students know about our classes. So we advertise our classes at our website, foothillsesl.ca. So our students can know anytime they want which classes. We do not put Zoom links online. If students want to participate, they have to connect with us, and we begin to have a relationship, and then we introduce them to the Zoom link. So we're not going to do that yet. Let me show you something else. Let's look at this. So this would be, okay, so once we've done the announcements, then we read a Bible text. So Buddhists, atheists, Muslims, we read this together. We used to read it out loud when we met in the church building, but online we found that just creates a cacophony. So what we do is one person reads this. So this is Luke 1, where the angel of the Lord appears to Zechariah, and Elizabeth will bear a son and call him John. So we read the text, then we read a summary and a little simpler English. And then we end the class with a seeker's prayer. God, sometimes we're afraid. Help us to believe you when you tell us good things will happen. Sometimes good things are still scary things. Help us not to be afraid. Amen. So once we've done the reading, you do our breakout rooms, and in the small groups, we'll do the vocabulary.
Yeah, we will. I was reading the chat comments. It's so interesting. Go ahead.
So it just depends on the level of the students. So this part of the class is geared for intermediate students, so they often don't need to spend much time on the first part of the lesson, but it gets progressively moves from recognition towards production.
Yeah.
And so they'll work through words that were found in the gospel text. We usually spend about 20 minutes on this, and then we move into the discussion questions. And in a Bible study, our questions are designed to help us understand what the Bible says and to apply the teaching of Jesus. And that's a great goal. But these questions, the goal is to help students, for us to get to know the students, to get to know how they think, how they feel, their experiences. And as we get to know them, we have better and better conversations. So this would be a sample question for this kind of stage 2 class. Zechariah was startled when he saw the angel appear before him. Being startled is like being scared and surprised. When have you been surprised? When have you been scared? Or question 6, children sometimes obey their parents, but they can also be disobedient. In what ways did you disobey your parents? So we like to ask questions that are an invitation to vulnerability, because if students pick that up and choose to be vulnerable, and we're vulnerable as well, we get to know each other more quickly. Question 7, Zachariah and Elizabeth were both old when the angel appeared to them. In your opinion, what is a good age to have children? So that will be an interesting question. Yeah. Question about Gabriel. Good news for Zachariah. What good news did you get this past week? What good news would you like to hear next week? Or Zachariah was unable to speak until the birth of his son John. Tell us about a time when you were silent and did not know what to say. And that's often the case for our immigrant friends, especially when they first come to Canada. They're silent. So we usually include some sort of a spiritual question in this lesson, a gentle one. So this one, Elizabeth said, "The Lord has done this for me. What is something that God has done for you?" So it's an invitation for people to talk about something in spiritual terms. And what we find is we do this week after week, month after month, and we find that students will start talking about God, or they'll talk about prayer, or they'll say, I don't believe, I'm not a Christian, but, or, you know, if I was a Christian, I would. And then they'll start saying like things like, you know, it makes sense that there's a creator, but I'm still trying to figure out who Jesus is, something like that. So then,
from the Zoom point of view, can I mention that when you screen share curriculum like this, you can use your mouse to just click and highlight a question, and then you say, you know, Tony, could you please read question 4 that has the blue highlight? So just a little Zoom tip there.
I'm going to show some of those in a couple minutes.
Okay, good.
So this is what the beginner lesson, so people can always look at these questions with some students if they want to just ask them what they see, the photos. And this is what the beginner lesson looks like.
So the beginner lesson, we paraphrased the main ideas in the same Bible passage, and we wrote 10 simple sentences. And the class will read through those. And then the vocabulary again highlights the bolded words from the sentences. And the students get an opportunity to first recognize a word and match it with a picture, and then read some of the words in simple sentences, and then try using the word in their own sentence. The page has just 2 or 3 questions down at the bottom. Who is the oldest woman you know who was pregnant? Like just life questions. It's not a Bible study. It's just questions for the beginner students to start a discussion. And then a very simple prayer at the end that's related somehow to the Bible passage.
So the stage 1 is about settlement. It's about friendship, no spiritual content. Stage 2 is like a gentle introduction to the life and teaching of Jesus for those who are curious. Most of the students who come from countries where they couldn't even ask questions about Jesus or the Bible or the church. And then stage 3 is like the spiritual focused classes. And this is what churches are good at. This is what churches know how to do. So like the Alpha class, ESL Bible studies. Here's a sample ESL Bible study that we do. So we did this a few weeks ago. This is from Matthew 24. So just so you know what the text is about, what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And Jesus talks about wars and rumors of war. And he says, the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. So what we would do is we would read the text, and then we'd have vocabulary based on the text, and then we'd have discussion questions. And these questions focus more on understanding the text and applying it. So a typical Bible study, like, well, question 1, Jesus followers asked him about the future, the end of the age. What would you like to know about the future? Fascinating question. Question 3, Jesus warned about people who would say they are the Christ, the one sent by God to save the world. How would you respond to someone who said they were sent by God to save the world? So what happened when we switched to online? When we did these classes in the church, we often had better English speakers who would come, like intermediate and strong, high intermediate students. And we would tend to have students who were more spiritually interested. But when we switched to online, right away, we had a wider variety of students coming to the Bible study. Mm-hmm. And in terms of spiritual interest, but also in terms of their English ability. So we had to adjust, we had to adapt to make the class better. So what we did is we would read the text, but before going to the vocabulary, we would go through the verses one by one, very slowly, trying to make sure we understood every word, every phrase. So Jesus left the temple. And we'd ask the students, what is a temple? And someone would say, it's a religious building. And someone would say, it's a place for prayer. And then we type that in. And we'd ask, they were walking away with his disciples. What are disciples? And someone would say followers. So we would add that to the text.
And students are often on their phones, getting definitions, and they're kind of studying the vocabulary as we go along.
Yeah, even something like call his attention to. What does that mean? And they might not know. And someone who's a little better in English says to ask people to concentrate or to focus on. And so instead of just reading the text, we would go through it very slowly. So we would take at least 30 to 40 minutes to work through the passage, phrase by phrase, word by word. And what we would do, because we're doing this online, we would send the students, you saw the link that we showed you earlier, we would send the students a link, and some of our students will download this and they'll work through all the questions, they'll look up everything in the text. So even some students who are a little bit weaker in English will come to the class ready to talk because they've worked through the whole passage and all the questions and all the vocabulary. So once we've gone through this in detail, we'll go through the vocabulary, and when we weren't doing it in detail, they wouldn't know a lot of vocabulary. But once we're doing this in great detail, they would always know the vocabulary, so they're able to match. So we'd read the 9 words: deceive, persecute, betray, etc. Then one student would read A, to be disloyal to someone who trusts you, and they would know, oh yeah, that's betray, because we talked about that earlier. So we go through the vocabulary usually very quickly. And then what I tried to do is I tried to add both spiritually focused questions and then more general or generic questions in this Bible study to accommodate those who are, they're less at a place of spiritual interest. Because what I remember one week doing this on a Saturday night, and there's a lot of spiritual questions, and the students, they don't know what to do with the questions because that's just not where they're at. So this is like a modified Bible study. And for my own purposes, I do the underlying questions have a less of a spiritual focus, and then the questions that are not underlined, they're more like a traditional Bible study question. So we'd read question 1, Jesus' followers called to his attention the temple buildings. Tell us about an important building in your home city or province. So students will give their answers, and I just start typing those out. Someone talks about a Catholic church. Someone talks about a Buddhist temple or the Imperial Palace or Golden Temple. So we're typing those all out, and we just work through the questions one by one. And we're not in a rush because we have probably 45 to 50 minutes to work through these. Jesus talks, question 2, about buildings being destroyed. Have you ever seen a building demolished? Jesus warned his followers about deception. Tell us about a time when someone deceived you. Again, it's a question, an invitation to vulnerability, but you don't have to have a spiritual focus to do that. Whereas question 5, more of a spiritual focus. Jesus warned about people who would say they are the Christ, the one sent by God to save the world. How would you respond to someone who said they were sent by God to save the world? Interesting question. Jesus talks about question 8, people being put to death or hated by all nations. How do you think you would respond if people hurt you because you were following Jesus? So what we end up with is we get to the end of the study, and then we have glosses explaining every part of the verses, and then we've gone through the vocabulary, and then we have answers. These are the answers that my students gave for all the various questions. And then some students actually ask me to save this, and then I send that to them. So they get the text beforehand, they work on the questions, they work on the answers, they use their dictionary, they understand, and then we go through all the questions, and then I send this to them, and they can then go through it once more. So that's all of the text that we wanted to show. So that takes us now to our time for questions and answers. So when did you want to say something?
I just wanted to summarize in this section, I guess for the past 40 minutes or so, Rick has shown examples of curriculum from all three stages of our pathway, the settlement stage, the bridges stage, and then the Bible study stage. And we have samples of lessons on the website. If you go to our Love New Canadians website, you can look at some of the samples of the lessons there and see our pathway diagram with the three stages. And that might make more sense, kind of how we put our approach to immigrant ministry together.
Yeah, so what we do is we write curriculum to use in our own church, and then we keep revising and fixing it, and then when we think it's in really good shape, we share it with others. So we just finished Luke 1:1-5 of our Bridges material. It has intermediate lessons, has beginner lessons, and it's probably been read 5 times, 6 times.
But we're just teaching it ourselves for the first time. So every once in a while we put the curriculum out there, and we've only taught it once, but we prefer to teach it 2 or 3 times before we share it, because we hate it when someone finds a mistake. But we do want to know if there's a typo or something. Let us know if anyone's using our curriculum. Also wanted to mention that we use other people's curriculum in our classes too. There's great curriculum out there for that settlement level teaching of ESL classes, and we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We've written curriculum when we couldn't find what we wanted that other people have published.
Okay, so when you registered, we asked if you had questions, and you had many, many questions. So I have 23 pages of questions, and we're going to answer a few of those now, okay? And then after we answer some of the questions, I don't think we'll get to all of them, but I've grouped them in categories. We'll try and answer as many as we can. Then towards the end of our session, we'll go into breakout rooms, because I wanted you to have that experience. Some of you may never have done that. So we'll go into breakout rooms to talk about 2 summative questions. Then we'll come back quickly, and that will be the end of our time together. So we still have 38 minutes.
And we'll stay online after we're done at noon. We'll stay online and just keep chatting with people.
Yeah, we're happy to do that.
Yeah.
So let's start with one question. What has been working well in your online ESL classes?
Well, lots of stuff's been working well. Like, that's a fairly general question. Some of the things we learned right away is when you're on Zoom and you see somebody, like, go, hey, hi, Susanna, it's so nice to see you this morning. Like, just make it personal right away. And that helps the students feel more relaxed and more engaged in what's going on.
Students, especially because some of our students are new to Zoom also, right? And we've had always technological issues that we had to work with, like starting with how to mute and unmute, things like that.
So we encourage, we open up the Zoom link even sometimes 30 minutes before the class. And there's almost always, a couple of eager students that are waiting to get on. And they just want to chat, or somebody has a question, and then you can't hear them, and you teach them mute, unmute. We'll go like, oh, we can't hear you. And for the beginners, that kind of thing. Yeah. So that's really helpful.
One thing we found is when we're live with students, it's easier to have interaction. And we found that students are a little bit more hesitant to participate. So what we do is we call on students. We're more directive. Like we say, Sammy, what do you think? And that seems to make our classes work better.
Yeah.
One thing we found is when we first used breakout rooms, that was a little bit chaotic. So if it's your very first class, maybe don't do that the first time. Get familiar, and then you can start with the breakout groups, the small groups. So what are some of the things that have not worked well and should be avoided?
Oh, we've got a whole long list.
So the first thing I thought of with that question is, okay, so Hannah was like our tech genius, so she was helping us, and then she went away for some, poor excuse.
Oh, she got married. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So she's away, and then so we go to have our breakout rooms, and it's like, we don't know how, we can't make it happen. And then that was very embarrassing. So okay, we'll get that all fixed up. And by the next class, no breakout rooms again, because
still hadn't got it fixed.
So for sure things are gonna happen that don't, so they have to have more than one person who knows what's going on, right? And So for sure, there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be technological challenges. And the thing is, you just pick yourself up. And the students are usually quite patient. And then you just keep going and okay, because we can learn one thing each week, right?
Yeah. And if you have students on your Zoom screen looking at you and you're looking at them, you can have your class. A lot of stuff can go wrong, but you can still have your class because you're still hanging out with your students, right? And you'll learn something, and then next week it'll go better, hopefully. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then as you get more comfortable, you'll be more confident, and then you'll be up to experimenting more with the technology. What can be done with Zoom? Someone asked, how can we start our first online ESL class? So that's a great question. So we really encourage churches we connect with to begin to work towards this 3-stage pathway that we talked about. Stage 1, settlement programming to help new Canadians settle well. Stage 2, the transition class, the bridges class for the spiritually curious. Then stage 3, the spiritual classes like Alpha and the Bible study. But if you're just starting out, that can be really intimidating to think, well, how are we supposed to get all those components? Okay, we don't have any class. No church can do everything at once. So what we suggest is just start with one class, some kind of a settlement class. And the easiest class to do is the conversation class. A conversation class, some call it a conversation club or a conversation cafe. It's a great way to get to know people. It doesn't require volunteers with special training, like Patti said.
Yeah, our version of a conversation class is literally conversation. It's not grammar, it's not other things. It's just, here's our topic for today. Here's some, 10 or 15 questions. Let's get into small groups and just talk about food and use the questions to guide the conversation. And our volunteers initially were very nervous. What if someone asks me about the past continuous perfect blah, blah, blah grammar question? And we just say, that's okay. You just say, I forgot how to teach grammar, but I can say it correctly. And Patti would be happy to answer your grammar question. Meanwhile, this is a conversation class. Let's keep visiting. Let's get, more tea or whatever,
Yeah.
And keep talking.
And the great thing about the conversational class is it doesn't take much planning. You don't have to write your own questions. You can if you want, but you can find great questions that others have written. You could use our questions if you'd like.
So our advice for starting your first time online ESL class is conversation class.
And then once you get comfortable with that, I don't know if that's 6 months, maybe a year, then you think about adding something else like the transition class, the bridges class, so people can have a general introduction to the gospel. Question, how can we advertise our online ESL classes?
For us, we already had lots of students in our on-site classes. So when we went online, we just emailed everybody and said, hey, we're online now, join us. And every week, more and more students got comfortable joining us.
After like a couple months, we invited because we invited people who'd been to classes for the last 2 years. And then Hannah started out inviting people who hadn't been to class for like a lot longer than that.
And we sent out hundreds of emails, and lots of them bounced back because the email wasn't valid anymore, or we typed in the wrong number. But if you're starting from scratch, we suggest hopefully you have 1 or 2 immigrant friends, new Canadian friends, and you can say, hey, do you want to talk about Canadian culture in a conversation class online, so that you can start a conversation class with just 1 or 2 friends and say, I know your English is already great. You've been here 10 years or whatever, but these classes will talk about cultural things in Canada. What is Thanksgiving? What is Remembrance Day? Those kind of things. So that you already can start your class with 1 or 2 students and then build from there. Do they have friends? Can you put up a boulevard sign, maybe? Rent a boulevard sign for 2 weeks or for a month that says free online ESL class, and then your email or your church's email.
Then what would you do with that?
Then if people respond to that email You email them back and say, yeah, let's talk on the phone. Then you talk to them on the phone and you give them the information about your class. If they're interested, then you give them the Zoom link. We don't ever advertise the Zoom link in public. People always have to go through a couple stages before they get that. Was there any other ideas for advertising that we had?
Well, church website.
A church website, yeah, you can put something up there.
Next question. Can I teach an ESL class without certification? Where can I get ESL training? Where can I get ESL certification?
Yeah, for sure. You teach a class without certification. Do you speak English? Are you friendly? Yes, you can teach an ESL class. You might not be teaching, grammar, or you might not be teaching pronunciation, but there's lots of settlement help that our new Canadian neighbors can benefit from just a kind Canadian who wants to spend time with them. I often tell our volunteers, we're not a language school. We don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops officially as a language school. We're just friendly people in the neighborhood who are saying, yeah, we'll help you practice your English, or we'll help you adjust to a new culture, that kind of thing. Many of my volunteers have wanted to get more language teaching training. One of the places is the Esl. I think it's based in Ontario, and it's an online certification. They're a great organization. You can sign up to get
distance learning, right?
Yeah, it's distance. So you can do everything by email, and they send videos to watch and articles to read and exercises to do. The fastest I've ever heard anyone doing that training is in 1 month. They blitzed through it, and they had a part-time job also and a family, but they were committed to getting it done. At the longest one of my volunteers took was about 1.5 years. And I think they had to pay to continue, after the first 6 months or year, because they weren't finished. I think there's like 10 or 12 modules you work through. At the end of that, you can take a 10-hour teaching practicum somewhere. One of my volunteers is doing this now, so their teaching practicum will be online with me in our classes. And the person observing them needs to be certified. So that's a little tricky there. The school will help you find someone. You can often pay someone who's certified to supervise your practicum, and yeah.
Any other thoughts on ESL training?
There's other ways to get trained. The Cooperative ESL Ministries is a Calgary-based organization, and I think there's one in Ontario and they do online training now, just helping church volunteers get more training in teaching ESL. Our Calgary Public Library has a system for training their ESL, English language volunteers. So just go online and see if there's something in your area.
Yeah, maybe in your community, there might be something like that.
One of the universities in Calgary does a 1 semester evening courses to get certified. Yeah, maybe they've gone online.
So hopefully there's something like that in your community, because I know we have people from BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario here today. So I've grouped together some questions. How can I encourage natural discussion? Should students ever raise their hand before speaking? Is it best to call on one person at a time? And how can I improve my teaching of a group of students?
Well, the encouraging natural discussion, I think that's a big part of that is just having the right questions to ask in your small group.
So good curriculum.
Yep. And Because we really push the idea of every class at some point breaks into a small group so that the students have way more time to interact and practice their speaking skills in a small group. We wouldn't require a student to like raise their hand to say something, with just 3 to 5 people. Because it's like you're sitting around having a cup of tea together, having a conversation. So you wouldn't like raise your hand to jump into the conversation.
But when we do big groups like 20 or 30, it sure is nice when they do that.
Yeah, they'll just put their hand up. We don't even use the Zoom thing, electronic little raise hand. We just tell students raise your hand. Or sometimes they just jump in if they're more outgoing. Once in a while, you have a student who wants to talk all the time. And then we'll say, in that setting, we'll say, okay, we'll take turns and I'll call you. Barbara, what do you think about that? Or, Maureen, what's your favorite, da, da, da. So we will be more directive online. We found that we need to be more directive in our online classes than when we were on site at the church.
Mm-hmm. And every once in a while, we've been tempted to kick a student out, but we never have.
Just some students don't get the social thing that's going on. And so we just have to work with them, and we'll privately say, you have a lot of great ideas, but we're a group of 4. And so you speak 1/4 of the time, 1/4 of the time. And as a volunteer, you only speak 1/4 of the time if there's 4 in your group, right? You say, this is being polite. You say all that to them privately. And if they still don't get it the next time, then privately you say to them, don't talk unless I ask you. And we've had to do that a few times with certain personalities, yeah.
Another
and
question.
They keep coming back. They keep coming back because they know you like them. Yeah.
Someone else asked, what is an ideal class size?
Boy, as big as big class sizes or little. A great class ratio between teacher, volunteer, and students would be like 1:4 or 1:5. We have some classes, our ratio's 1:3. We'll run a class if it's 1:10. If we have 20, 25 students who show up and 3 volunteers, you can do it. You can even do the small groups, but then we start recruiting more volunteers because it's always nice to keep that volunteer student ratio to like a nice conversation size.
So what do
we don't limit, we don't put a cap on our classes. We never say 10 students and that's it, or 20 students and that's it, because it doesn't seem very neighborly. Like if somebody wants to join, we say, sure, we'd love to have you. And then we scramble to find more volunteers. We take the onus of making it a good class. We never want to say no to a student so that it's more convenient to us.
So what do we do when someone asks a question in a large group that is a question that should be handled offline? So the example is, should Audrey be in the beginner or intermediate group?
If the option will be applied right away, you can deal with that immediately. Oh, June, would you, we can say, Audrey, why don't you start with the beginner small group? And if it's too easy, next week, go into the intermediate. So we don't lock students in to a certain class or group. We're not a language school. We don't have to do that. They're adults and we're all visiting together. If it's an issue that would better be handled after class, I just say, Audrey, let's talk about that after class. And then when the Zoom class is done, or just before it's done, Audrey, please stay. We're gonna chat. We're gonna talk for a minute, that kind of thing. Once in a while, a volunteer will hijack the class. That's hilarious when they're not on the same page as the teacher. And we have strategies for that too that are respectful and friendly. Yeah.
So this next question is about the Zoom account. So does Zoom have a special rate for churches? I couldn't find one. Do we need to pay for every class? No. So you pay for your Zoom account. You can pay by the month or by the year. And like if it's a cash challenge, maybe your church has a Zoom account that they would let you use for 2 hours a week, or maybe you have a friend who would let them use yours. You could use their Zoom account, something like that. You might have to get creative. When do we need a second Zoom account? So what we found is as soon as our classes were too big, we just decided to have a second Zoom account. It just makes things a lot easier for us. When we're having 2 different classes at the same time. Because you can't have one account and 2 classes at the same time.
So our class size didn't determine that. It was, we wanted to run a beginner version and an intermediate version of the same class from start to finish. Then we got a second Zoom account.
So what does a tech host do? Hey, maybe Hannah, do you want to answer that question?
Sure. You do a lot of things is maybe the best way to put it. But for example, in our Bridges class, Patti and Rick will lead the curriculum itself. And my job is more so I watch as people join, I separate them into small groups. If somebody has an issue joining, maybe with their audio or video, I help out with that. I also monitor if somebody's screen, if there's a lot of background noise, or just maybe they're having a conversation with somebody in the room. That's happened a couple times too. I mute them just so that Rick and Patti can focus on not losing their spot in whatever they're going through. All of that becomes my responsibility, which, talking about it, it seems like it's not a lot, but you can fill the first half an hour of a class just trying to keep up with the various tech responsibilities that pop up on Zoom. And so I also send out our emails as well. That has become part of mine. So in the meetings, if somebody would like to invite their friend, I'll normally be the one who invites that person. They'll give me the email and I'll send out the invite while we're in class as well. And I'll monitor my email, see who's having issues joining, whatnot, as I'm in the class. You watch every form that people could reach out to you on. You watch that and see what's going on.
I know you could rename people. Do you ever rename anyone?
I do. Often we have students join and they'll use they'll use characters or Chinese characters for their name, which is great. But often when we put them into breakout rooms, our volunteers, if they're new or they haven't been around that long, our volunteers aren't familiar with who they are. So I'll rename them to whatever they prefer to go by. The other thing too is if we have students, sometimes they'll join and our beginner students often join on a family member's iPad, so that's not their name. And so I'll go in and I'll change their name so that rather than saying, so Jeffrey's iPad, it'll say who the students actually are because Jeffrey might be somebody else.
So if there's 2 volunteers leading class, one is the teachery volunteer and one is more the techie volunteer. That works really well. Yeah.
So one person can do both, but it sure makes it easier, especially when you're first starting. If one person is looking after the tech part and the other person's doing the teaching part. Someone asked about a co-host. When do you assign a co-host? So we set it up so only the host or co-host can share the screen. So basically you get someone to be the co-host when you want them to share their screen. The co-host is not able to assign people to breakout rooms. They can't make other co-hosts. So the host will need to do that. Someone else asked about helping students with navigating their cell phones and their tablets. Because students are using a lot of different devices, laptops, iPhones, tablets. So what you'll find when you're using those other devices is the control panel will be a little different than on the various devices. So regularly you have something like where you have 3 dots you have to click, or you'll have the word more. You'll have to click in order to see the various Zoom options. Some students using mobile phones have said when a file is shared using screen share, it's too small for them to see. So someone else has told me it works best for them if they do the landscape view rather than portrait view. And then what you can do, you know, like when you have a photo and you put your fingers down and you pinch and you move it out, you can do that with what's being shared on your cell phone. So those are some of the things. There's actually more than what I've just said, but there's answers to these questions online. Someone else asked, how can I make our Zoom classes secure? So for sure, include a passcode. That's Zoom's word for password. We don't advertise our Zoom links. So we invite our students directly to classes through email. You could lock your meeting if you want to make it more secure. You can remove a participant. If for some reason, somehow someone got onto your meeting, you could lock them out. And that's about security. Someone else asked, how do we record a Zoom class? So what you could do, you have to be the host, and then down at the bottom of your screen, it will hit record. So you click record, and then I always click record to the cloud. So it's fairly simple to do. And then how do you access that? Well, you go to your Zoom account and you just click recordings, and then that'll take you to whatever things you've recorded in the past. And you can record the chat, you can record audio, or you can record everything. So you have 3 options of what to record. Someone asked, is it possible for students to screen share? And the answer is yes. So but you have to give them permission. So you can set it up so anyone can screen share, or you can give a specific person screen share ability by making them a co-host. Someone else asked a question. I'll just answer it quickly. So I'll answer them more directly later, but they're asking about, they want to put a PDF in and they want to fill it in. So the way to do that is you either make it a fillable PDF. You can use the text box feature in screen share, but it's a little messy. I'll talk to that person later about more thoughts on that. Okay, okay, our time's almost up. What I want to do is I'll answer the rest of some of your questions. I'll answer more directly. I'll send you an email. I want us to go into breakout rooms just for like about 7 minutes. So Bethany is going to put us in breakout rooms. And what we're going to do is we're going to answer in the breakout room 2 questions. The questions are, what am I taking away from this webinar? And what's my next step in intercultural ministry? Okay, so that, I'm so glad that you joined us. I was gonna say this morning, but for some of you, it's not this morning. Thanks so much for coming. Patti was in one of the small groups, so she'll be joining me in a minute.
I'm here.
Oh,
I'm here.
Okay. So we're happy to stick around for, you know, as long as you'd like to address any questions you have. But this is the formal end of our time. But I want to reemphasize that if you have questions, like we've spent all this time trying to understand this stuff just to survive, right? So why don't you take advantage of that? So if you're having some problem with your online church-based ESL class, ask us. Maybe we can answer with an email. Maybe we can talk on the phone. Because the reason we started Love New Canadians is to help churches throughout Canada develop pathways to Jesus for immigrants. So if we can help you, please let us do so. We would love to do that. So thanks for Bethany and Hannah for helping us out today. And that concludes our session. So what we're going to do is if you want to ask questions, I guess we can do it in the chat. And Patti and I, and probably Hannah and Bethany, will do our best to answer those. Okay, oh, we have some. Okay. Wow, look at all the chats.
I know we had a question a little bit earlier in the chat about if we do graduations or certificates.
Hey, Patti?
We do not. The advantage of not being there's so many advantages of not being a language school. And the, the one thing we have considered is, should we do kind of graduation or certificates more like a language school? And we just decided not to. A lot of our students come to us when their link classes are all done. And I don't know, where was I going with that thought? Okay, we have done certificates in some situations, but I just prefer not to. It's like, I like to keep it at the level of, well, we're friends. We're all friends and we're learning from each other. And yeah, we don't do certificate. I think in the first few years, some students were trying to use a certificate of participation as some kind of, you know, they were using it on a resume or those kind of things. And we just didn't feel comfortable with that. No, that's my final answer.
I see one question is, can you edit polls? Yes, you can. It's fairly simple to do. So when you just go to the poll and click edit, no problem at all. Any other questions? What are your,
There was a question in the breakout room. I think Susanna had the question about not having any volunteers. She's doing it all on her own. So how would you recommend that somebody is able to recruit some other volunteers to help?
Patty, how do you recruit volunteers?
Yeah, beg a friend to help you. Like, once you get started, we've found that once someone comes to help you, even if you say, could you just help me for the next 3 classes? They're gonna love it. Well, most people love it. And well, that's one suggestion. We've put announcements in our church bulletin, but we don't say for specific classes. We'll just say, would you like to help us in our immigrant intercultural ministries? Because someone might answer who's just not, doesn't have enough strength to be, say, a good conversation partner. So then we'll ask for we'll say, yeah, we need help with our, you know, photocopying or editing or, you know, different things like that. I generally like to meet with a person once before accepting their offer to help in a specific class, because you just learn a lot about a person having a 20-minute conversation with them, right? How other strategies to finding someone to help you besides begging a friend and making some kind of church announcement? Yeah, those 2 things is what comes to my mind right now. Bethany or Rick, any other ideas?
Okay, we have not actually done this, but I have some friends who they are launching an ESL class with the church that they are with currently. And what they have done to help with that is they reached out to some of the other churches within their area who did not have similar classes running, or perhaps since COVID has happened, those classes have stopped. And so they reached out by just saying, we have started this. Is anybody in your ministry interested in helping out for the time being? They found that so many volunteer opportunities kind of stopped once COVID happened, that people are looking for ways. And so maybe they haven't tried it before, but they did get responses back with people who had never even really joined them or heard of them before, who were willing to help out and start because it was a volunteer opportunity with an organization that they were familiar with or a church that they knew of.
Oh, that's such a great idea, Hannah. Also, you can ask the seniors ministry of your church, some of the retired folks, maybe they would just like to be a conversation partner, that kind of idea. Yeah.
Question from Margaret. She asked,
Ooh,
we just received,
I just asked our men's pastor, men's ministry, if he knew any men who would like to give an hour a week on Zoom in a conversation class, because a couple of the classes have all female volunteers, which is wonderful, but it's just nice to have a guy represented for the male students also. Go ahead. Sorry, honey.
We received the new Canada Conversation Class curriculum. We're delighted with the beginner handouts. I wonder if you have or will have beginner handouts for the rest of the conversation class lessons. So how far have you got on that?
Is that the regular conversation class lessons?
We just started working on those.
We have 12 lessons beginnerized, and in the next couple weeks, Shay, who's there, hi Shay, Shay and I are going to work on 12 more, yeah, for next semester. So we'll just keep working on that, because yeah, we should have done that years ago, but the beginnerization of the lessons can be really helpful. Yeah.
And we can get that information, sorry, we can get that information from your website, right?
Well, eventually, it's like we have to try and update our website, right? So
yeah, that one's so fresh. I don't think it's on the website yet. Yeah.
Of the 12 lessons. I updated it last week, but we'll probably in a week or a month or two, we'll update that. Someone asked, can you use iPad as a host? I don't think so. Bethany, do you know?
You can use iPad or iPhone or any sort of smartphone or tablet as a host, but you have limitations. You don't have all the same capabilities as you do on a desktop or a laptop, but you can host from there. You just have limited options.
Okay.
Someone in the chat has, we don't have any student connections. How do we find students? And I would say something similar to the, finding a co-teacher is like ask immigrant friends if they would just join a conversation class with you as, and if they're Christian immigrant friends, just say, this is a ministry. Would you come? We're going to talk about Canadian culture in a conversation class. And once you have something started, even with 2 students, you never, don't stop. Just keep that going. Do your 10 weeks or your 6 weeks or your 12 weeks. And you never know what God has around the corner. We've had many, many churches say, we did it. We started with 2 students, and then by the end of the semester, they had 10. And next semester, they had 20. And they don't even know how all those students started coming. But don't be discouraged to start a class just with 2 people. And just keep doing it faithfully, and email us every week saying, please encourage me. I still only have 2 students, because we'll encourage you, because that's what's happened. When we first started almost 15 years ago, we had 2 students who came, and we had 5 volunteers. And every week we had more volunteers than we had students, and we just didn't stop. And that one of those 2 students is the one who said, I only came back because you smile at me every week. So she didn't even care about what we were teaching, right? So just don't stop, just keep going. And then email us if you want encouragement, okay? Because you don't know what God has around the corner. And it's God's heart to welcome the foreigner and treat them like we do a citizen, and love them, and show his love to them. He wants your idea to succeed, because he's on the side of the immigrant. Yeah.
Okay, so it looks like that's the end of the questions. So once again, thank you so much. And if we can do anything to help you with your ministry, please let us know. Have a great rest of your day. Blessings on you.